Our presentation is titled Getting Through the Gate and Beyond, Accelerated Learning in the Developmental English Classroom. And our speaker is Michelle Zollars. Michelle has been teaching developmental writing at Patrick Henry Community College since 1992, where she is also the Accelerated Learning Program Coordinator. She recently completed a grant through the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation entitled Global Skills for College Completion, the intent of which is to raise pass rates for developmental students to 80%. She is a member of her college's Southern Center for Active Learning Excellence, which trains other college faculty in the use of active cooperative learning, and was a member of the Virginia Community College System Developmental English Redesign team. In this presentation, Michelle will discuss the Accelerated Learning Program, or ALP, at PHCC, which began in 2009 and is now part of the state-mandated Developmental English Redesign. Michelle, are you ready to get this conference off to a great start for us?
You bet, thanks.
Okay, well then let's get started.
Good morning, everyone. As Megan said, my name is Michelle Zollars, and I am thrilled to be able to speak with you today about one of my passions, and that is accelerated learning. We began accelerated learning at Patrick Henry several years ago, somewhat on a whim, and I will tell you more about our little story in a little while. First, though, I would just like to give you some background information on what ALP is and how it works. A broad definition of ALP is that it provides an opportunity for students to enroll in a developmental English course and the college level course concurrently with the same instructor. And I'd like to go into a little detail about some of the aspects of that definition. At Patrick Henry, we use the model provided by the Community College of Baltimore County, and I'll also speak about that in just a few minutes. At Patrick Henry and at the Community College of Baltimore County and in actually over 100 other colleges across the country, the ALP program that we use follows a very definite model. ALP has different definitions across the country. There are several systems doing acceleration. The ALP model, though, calls for what's really important here is that the person teaching the developmental course is also the same person teaching the college level course. This is really key to the success of the program. Some colleges use what's called a fast track, which teaches the developmental portion for the first half of the semester and then the on-level portion for the second half of the semester. This has the same goal. It gets the students through their on-level course in the same semester as their developmental course. However, we're finding that ALP has more benefits, and I'll address those in just a few moments. But again, the key here, and what's really important, is that you have the same instructor for both the developmental and the on-level section. Now I'd like to talk to you about how ALP actually works. When we have registration, we fix the courses so that the students have to enroll in both courses together. So, for example, you have a freshman composition course and a developmental English course. As far as the makeup of the class goes, the composition class is about half developmental and half non-developmental. I'll take this as an opportunity to explain that in a little bit more detail. At Patrick Henry, we first began strictly following the model at Baltimore County, and that model consists of a total of 18 students in the class. 8 of the students are developmental, 10 of the students are non-developmental. CCBC's theory was that you need slightly more non-developmental students in the course than developmental students. We began with that number when we started several years ago. We have adjusted that a little bit, and now we have the numbers of 10 developmental and 12 non-developmental still keeping a good mix of the two students. Now, regarding the students who are not developmental, it could be that they had been in the past. It may have been that they took Developmental English as a standalone course and passed it, and then were able to go ahead and sign up for their freshman composition course. So you can see that there is quite a mixture of different student levels in that course. Okay? And so that's what the English 111, in my case, the freshman composition course, that's how that course is made up. Okay? Now let's talk about what happens in that freshman comp course. As you can see, it is taught just like any freshman comp course. It is important to remember that when you teach the freshman comp course, don't treat it any differently than you would just a regular non-ALP freshman comp course. Of course, your objectives are going to be the same, the material you cover, the textbooks. There is no difference at all between a regular comp course and an ALP course, because remember, half of your students approximately are not developmental anyway, so you don't want to make any differences for them. The differences come after the comp course, and that's when the developmental students remain with the teacher for the developmental course. With scheduling, we have found that this is really important, that you teach the freshman comp course first, and then after the comp course, the developmental students remain with you. It's also important that you have the developmental course immediately following the comp course, not scheduled later in the day or not scheduled on a different day. And we'll talk about the importance of that continuity in just a moment. I also want to take a moment here to talk about classroom scheduling. Okay? When I first learned about ALP from the Community College of Baltimore County, and I learned their best practices, one of the things that they emphasized was that it was important to switch classrooms. Okay? The reason for this, in their opinion, was that it helps to alleviate what they call the developmental stigma. Well, at Patrick Henry, 85% of our students are developmental, so there's really not a stigma, so to speak. Now, we did follow their suggestion the first couple of semesters, where after the freshman comp course, we did switch classrooms. The developmental students and I would go to a different classroom. But that just got to be a lot of trouble with scheduling. And something else also that happens, our courses, our 3-credit courses, are an hour and 15 minutes, 2 days a week. Well, what we discovered, and as you start ALP and get it going on your campus, you'll find different things that work for you as well. But what I found was my students really did not want that 15-minute break between the comp course and the developmental course. And so we just decided to maybe take a quick 5-minute break, or they could just run out as long as they needed to. And then we just started the course as soon as we felt like it. And staying in the same classroom helped with that. And so the students were all in favor of just staying in the same classroom. They really didn't see a need to move on to a different class. And that helped out in every aspect. It helped with the timing. It helped with the people who scheduled the classrooms. And the students were happy with that. So that was not a problem. And so again, just to review, schedule your comp class first, and then schedule your developmental course to follow immediately after. Okay, so what happens in the credit class? What happens in the freshman comp class? Well, like I said before, the same thing that happens in a traditional class. Now, at Patrick Henry, the traditional comp class is rhetoric-based. I know that's not the case with every college, but it really doesn't matter. What's really important is that as you teach that freshman comp class, that you make no changes. You make no reference to the fact that half of the students are developmental. You use the same syllabus. Everything stays the same in the credit class. Very, very important. Okay, so let's talk about what happens in the developmental portion of the class. I think this is where the success of the program really happens, and that's one of the things I'll be discussing in a few minutes, is how successful ALP programs are as far as pass rates are concerned, and also the progress of the students, okay? So let's just talk about what I do sometimes in my developmental class, but let me give you the big picture first, okay? If you look at the very last bullet, discussing problems interfering with the student's progress in the credit course, okay? Now, as I'm sure you know, a lot of times the problems that students have in a course have nothing to do with the course itself. A lot of times it's life issues. It's not being able to find a babysitter, or not being able to find a ride to work, or they're having personal issues that are just getting in the way, or maybe work issues. We do spend a lot of time discussing that somewhat baggage that a lot of times these students will bring to class with them. But we also discuss the academic areas as well, okay? But let's just start at the beginning and go over a few of these. So we spend time in the developmental class answering questions left over from the composition class. If your students are like mine, a lot of times, especially if it's a big class, 20, 22 students, or even as many as 25, some students are often hesitant to ask questions. They're afraid that their questions might sound stupid, or nobody else has that question, and of course we know that's not true. But students who have this special time with you they'll grow to feel comfortable with you, and they'll feel close to the rest of the students in the class, and they will be more comfortable asking questions. So if I don't get a lot of questions from my developmental students during the freshman comp class, I'm sure that the questions will come later, and they do once we get into that class. And a lot of times they'll ask such good questions in the developmental section of the course that I'll carry those over to the next class when the freshman comp class meets, and I'll say, hey, we've got some other questions that have come up. Let me address these for the whole class. And it winds up being really, really beneficial. Something else we spend a lot of time doing is working on the next paper for the freshman comp course. And really, that's the main thing that your job is as an ALP instructor, is to do whatever it takes for the students to be successful in the freshman comp course. And we spend a lot of time working on the writing process. We will take the essays that are due in the freshman comp class, and we will move on. We will do pre-writing exercises. I'll help them with their thesis statements. We do a lot of cooperative learning, so I'll have them work in pairs or in groups to brainstorm ideas. Really, it's almost like with only 8 or 10 students in the class, it's almost like they have me as a personal tutor. And I think that's one of the reasons that this course program is so successful, okay? So we spend a lot of time focusing on whatever needs to be done for that next essay. Now, like I said, it might start with just discussing ideas for the essay. It could be brainstorming, it could be the pre-writing, it could be just working on a rough draft. But I do spend a lot of time in the ALP section, the developmental section, as almost like a writing lab, or a chance for them to, if we're lucky enough to be in a computer lab, I give them time to actually compose their papers, because, again, if your students are like mine, they may not know proper format for typing up a paper. We work on all of that. Just those little things that a lot of time in a big class we just don't have time to cover. Okay. I also give them time in the developmental section to write short papers that somehow help them with what we're doing in the freshman comp class. Now, one thing that I don't do is to give them extra papers to write. Okay. Everything that we write in the developmental section has something to do with what we're working on in the freshman comp section. It might be an outline. It might be just working on perhaps an introductory paragraph or an essay that we may be working on, just a variety of things. It's all about working in the moment. It's thinking about what do they need right now that's going to help them the most with what we're doing in freshman composition. We also do a little research. The last paper, in fact, what my students are working on right now, is an argumentative research essay. And many students come into college, not just developmental students, but lots of students come into college unfamiliar with research, without a lot of experience or no experience. At Patrick Henry, we have a lot of non-traditional students. And so even students who have been out of school for a long time, even if they did research, as you know, research methods have changed. And so we do spend a lot of time with me just showing them how to do research, showing them how to do works cited pages and in-text citations, showing them how to use MLA and APA, just the basics, so that they'll be more prepared for their next course, whether it's an English course or another course in which they're having to do research. And so with that first set of bullets, you can kind of see that a lot of the focus in the developmental course is simply taking what I assign in the freshman comp course and really digging into it, giving them time to do what they may be stumped at home doing. You know, when you're not there to answer the questions or to help them or to pat them on the back and say, oh, that's a great start, let me give you some suggestions. With a small class, you have time to do that. Now, regarding what we typically would teach in a developmental English class, we do work on those reading and writing skills. Now, let me take this time to mention something. When I was introduced, Megan mentioned that I was working on the Virginia Community College System English Redesign team. Let me take this time to explain a little bit about that so that you can see the connection here. The Virginia Community College System, ever since I was part of it, which has been over 20 years, we always taught reading and writing separately. And that's what I had done. I'd always taught writing. Well, in January of this year, so it's just been for a few months, we implemented an integration of reading and writing. And so our developmental English courses are literacy-based and they are integrated reading and writing. And so previously, as a developmental writing instructor, I had been using my writing lab. Well, when we decided to integrate, I knew I wanted to continue to have some type of technology support, and so we switched to my skills lab. And so in the developmental section of the course, we do spend some time working on the grammar and the reading and the different types of skills that my skills lab helps with. My skills lab gives a learning path, and so students are able to take a test, an assessment that points out the reading and writing skills that they need help on. And what works out really well for the ALP course, the developmental section, is that students can be working on different things at different times. For example, a few of the students may be working on an essay for the next class, where some of the students might be working on their progress in my skills lab. There's always something to do. The students aren't usually listening to me lecture or really anything similar to that during the developmental section, because they have a very specific course pattern or course path to follow, not just from my skills lab, but just knowing, say they have a cause and effect essay due in a week and a half. They know where they need to be. They know at what point they need to be on their essay, but they also know where they need to be in my skills lab. And so a lot of what takes place in the developmental section is very independent, very student specific, and I just help them keep up with what they need to be doing at the moment. And again, a lot of it has to do with computer access. My area is economically depressed. A lot of my students don't have a computer at home, and so we spend a lot of time just sitting in front of the computer, either doing my skills lab work or working on their essays. Okay. Now let's look at the second to the last bullet. Okay, discussing how to succeed as a college student, including advising for the next semester. I will also mention that at Patrick Henry, we are a relatively small school. We have about 3,500 head count. And so we have the luxury and I consider it a pleasure of faculty being also advisors. And when students are in developmental courses, there are a handful of us who teach developmental who are considered developmental advisors. And so, for example, our summer schedule just came out this week, and so we spent some time in class the other day actually looking at the summer schedule and talking about what may be good classes for them to take. And so we do have the luxury of having a little extra time just to do that, just to do those things, give the students suggestions, You know, if there are certain teachers or certain courses that we would recommend that they take in the summer, we talk about that. But we do talk a lot about succeeding as a college student. I don't have time to do that in the freshman comp class a lot of times, you know. But in this small ALP course, I can talk about study skills and time management and critical thinking and the things that are really going to matter, things that are going to really help them get through, okay? But let me address one more thing, return to something. Writing a paper isn't rocket science. I know that sometimes students struggle with writing for different reasons, but I think a lot of times what interferes the most with student success, especially developmental students, you know, what keeps them from getting through that gate is them seeing the value in the developmental course, okay? And what's important here is that they see the value right away. And so I just want to encourage you, if you're considering ALP on your campus or if you're already implementing it, do spend some time helping your students with those affective issues. Okay, so let's talk about what really matters, and that's the students. Okay, so what does this mean for them? 4 key points. Of course, they get into their college level English course sooner. See, as I'm sure you know, developmental courses have a really low success rate. Students drop out, the attrition is high, and so we really want to look at what's going to make them stick with us, what's going to help them to feel successful. And this first idea is key. Since they're taking their college level English course along with their developmental English course, they feel more like real college students. They're seeing what matters right at the moment. You know, they're not waiting until next semester to use what they've learned. They're using it like today. Okay? Also really important. The relationship that develops among the students who take the courses together and also between the students and the instructor. When you have a small class like that, the bond that forms is really amazing. They feel much more comfortable talking to a small group than in front of 22 students, especially if they feel like they're not up to par with the other students or they're just hesitant to get as involved when it's a big class. But when I have those 10 students, it's like they become this little family. And I think one of the reasons for that, of course, is because I use a lot of cooperative learning. But I just put them in situations where they really do have to kind of depend on each other. And that makes a big difference when they see that, you know, they have similar issues or similar ideas and they can discuss those freely in that small class. So the bond that forms is amazing because it also carries on to the next semester. Just this week I was talking to students about what courses to take in the summer and in the fall, and I could hear them talking about, oh, let's sign up for this course together. And so they feel that bond, and one of the things that keeps students returning is that sense of community, that sense of belonging that they feel as part of the college community. A lot of times developmental students don't get that. I had a colleague one time refer to community colleges as drive-through colleges because that's kind of the atmosphere that we felt we had at Patrick Henry. They drive in, come in, get what they needed, and drive away, kind of like McDonald's. And so we're trying really hard to give our students that sense of belonging. Third bullet, contextualization. As I said, students see right away what the value is of what they're learning. You know, so many times when I taught developmental writing in the past, I always found myself saying, oh, this will be so important next semester when you get into your history class or you get into your freshman comp class, you know, when you get into the courses where you're doing a lot of writing. I don't have to sell it like that anymore. They understand that they need to know how to write good thesis statements and they need to know subject-verb agreement because they need to use it in the paper that they're writing for the class that they just left. And so that really is amazing, the connection that they start to see at that point, okay? And as I've said for the last few minutes, your goal is to do whatever it takes that will maximize their success in the on-level course. And this is one thing that's really important. Once you get to know that small group of students, you're going to know what it is that they need. A lot of times it's nothing more than a pat on the back. or it might be just a little extra help with organization, or it might be a grammar weakness that they have. But that small class gives you the chance to do that. You'll get to know your students so well that there's no way that they won't succeed as long as they stick with you. And that's another point I'd like to make right here. Once I started, I don't know why, but once I started teaching ALP, my two big concerns, attendance and not doing homework, disappeared. I'm not really sure why, because the students are still the same students, but for some reason, being in this ALP section, them realizing that, you know, it's kind of like it's a special program, and not everybody gets to do it, and it's so valuable. Maybe they just see that they really need to work hard and do what's expected, but attendance and homework issues just kind of went out the door once we started the ALP program. Okay, so you've got an idea now of how ALP works, how to schedule it, what you do in both classes, okay? I am an English teacher. I don't crunch numbers very well, so I'm just going to share a couple of things with you here. If you would like more hard data, I would be glad to send that to you individually. You can just let me know. But these are just 2 points I'd like to make, and ALP has been in the systems now long enough that we're seeing some good data. The pass rate for the ALP, for the developmental course, is twice the success rate as non-ALP courses. So in other words, we have twice as many students passing when they take developmental as an ALP course than as a standalone course. I've been working real closely for the last few years with the Community College Research Center, which is based at Columbia University. And they did a study in 2010 confirming these results. And also, this is really important, and I can send you more specific data on this as well. But the bottom line is important. You know, colleges, I know they're not in it for profit, but you've got to meet your bottom line. We have found, and the Community College Research Center backs this up, that even though the ALP course is small, the cost per successful student is actually lower. So ALP actually saves your college money. And again, I would be glad to send you the data on that if you need it. Okay, so I'd like to take a second and talk about ALP specifically at Patrick Henry. Okay. As Megan said when she introduced me, we started about 4 years ago, and we started it with one section. I'll tell you the story of how this began. If you're like me, a lot of times you go to conferences and you're looking for different interesting sessions to go to. Well, about 5 years ago, the National Developmental Ed Conference was about an hour from where I live. And so I drove down and went in to I couldn't stay the whole time, so I just went for one day. And I went in and I looked at the program, and you know how it is, you look for a session that sounds good. And so I saw a section in the description said something like, students take their developmental course and their own level course in the same semester. And I was like, well, that sounds pretty interesting. So I went to this session, and I have to tell you, it changed my life. It changed my students' lives, and it has now become nationwide. It has become part of our whole community college system redesign in Virginia. And that was a session that I went to with Peter Adams from the Community College of Baltimore County. And I went to his session. This was in March of that year. I went back home the next day, went to my dean and said, I went to this session. I really want to try this. She said, great, let's put it on the schedule for fall. And we did with one section. That summer I went to the ALP Institute in Baltimore to get further instruction on how to actually implement ALP. That first year that I taught it, that first semester, I had a 100% pass rate, which was just unheard of. From that point on, 100%, sometimes as low as 85% pass rate, because you know you lose students. Sometimes students drop out and it can't be helped. but the success rate was huge at my college. We then developed this partnership with CCVC. We did more training. CCVC receives a grant from the Hewlett Foundation, which helped CCVC and us to expand our programs and to go out and train other colleges on how to implement ALP. At Patrick Henry, we scaled up each semester. We added more sections, and we even added a technical writing section. There are basically two what would be called freshman on-level English courses at Patrick Henry, the transfer freshman comp course, and then we also have technical writing, which is for our programs like welding, motorsports, and things like that. And it has been just as successful in the technical writing program as well. Well, surprisingly, or maybe not, because of the success of ALP, my developmental math colleagues started looking into it as well. And they have also implemented it. And with the math instructors, what they do is they take what's typically a first-year on-level math course, such as pre-calculus or math for liberal arts, and they pair it with their highest level developmental math course. So it's very similar in structure to how the English ALP works as well. Now I'd like to take a moment and talk to you about how ALP has become part of our English redesign team. I know that in addition to acceleration, integration is also one of the new innovations that is happening across the country. A lot of the states are integrating reading and writing. We started working on this several semesters ago, but what we're doing now is making it statewide. Okay, and so let me give you a quick explanation of how that works. The system developed 3 tiers of developmental English, and again, they're combined. And what we do for the top tier is we teach accelerated learning. And so it became so popular, and the data proved that the students were so successful that it is now a requirement. See, before, taking ALP was an option for students who tested highest into developmental. Now it is mandated. In other words, if a student tests in the top tier of developmental English, then they are enrolled in the ALP course. I'd like to end with this idea. Acceleration has become so popular that there is now some national attention for it. California has what's called the California Acceleration Project. Berkeley City College also is doing acceleration. It's very, very widespread. Okay, there's funding for it through different foundations. Research is being done through CCRC and also through Achieving the Dream. And one thing that I really consider to be an indicator of how important people are realizing acceleration is the classroom support that is coming for acceleration. There are even textbooks out now that have accelerated learning supplements. 2 of those are Strategies for Successful Writing and the Prentice Hall Guide for College Writers. These ALP supplements take the material that are in these freshman comp books and give strategies for the developmental students to help them understand the readings and also to help them with the writing process for the assignments the writing assignments that are given in those 2 textbooks. And to end, I would just like to mention that there are a couple of different ways that you can find out more about accelerated learning. As I mentioned, the Community College of Baltimore County is kind of the place to go for the basic training. They have their own institute in the summer where you can go and learn all of the best practices about implementing ALP on your campus. You can see some information there on your screen. The contact person is Peter Adams, the dates for the institute, and they also have a really good website. At the website, you can see a list of over 100 colleges across the country who have implemented CCVC's program using their model. And also, I would be happy to discuss ALP with you. I've done consultations just by email or telephone. I also do on-site visits to help you actually implement it on your campus. You can see my email address there. I am just so excited about ALP and what it does for our students and the popularity that it's gaining across the country that I really can't say enough good things about it. It just seems to be one of those things that if it's at all possible to do on your campus, it really needs to be done. Thank you, and I hope that what I spoke with you about today was informative, and that if you're not doing ALP already, that you might consider it. And I would be glad to answer any questions or to address any issues or concerns that you might have, either through our time today or if you would like to email me later on, that would be great. Thanks a lot for coming to the session today.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was really great. We do have a few questions for you that came in.
Okay.
This first one is from George, and he said that you mentioned that you use cooperative learning practices to get students to depend on each other.
Yes.
What can you name a couple of practices that you use?
Oh, sure. I could talk all day about that, but I'll just give a couple. With cooperative learning, I not only use it in the developmental section, I also use it in the 111 section as well. With cooperative learning, the way that we do it at Patrick Henry is we use 3 different types of groups in the classroom. We use what are called base groups, and that's where you put students together early in the semester, maybe about 3 students. And when I do this in the freshman comp class, I always want to make sure that the base group is a mixture of developmental and non-developmental students. They're like a little unit. They stick together all semester. Now, I don't want you to think that I use cooperative learning every day, every moment of the day, but with base groups, they stay together all semester. Now, they don't necessarily have to sit together or anything, but what I do with them, they know that if, let's say we're having a quiz or a test that day, as soon as they get to class, the 3 people in the base group get together and maybe study, okay, quiz each other real quickly. I also use the base groups for attendance. I don't take roll after the first week. I just say, okay, who's missing in your group? And I'll know who's not there. I use base groups to do homework review. They also just get together outside of class just to study. Again, they form that little connection. Again, that's a base group, about 3 people, and that goes all semester, okay? I also use what are called formal groups, and this is a really, really great activity to use in an ALP class. With a formal group, that means that there's a project due, and I group the students in a certain way for the project. For example, one of the projects that I do and the students love is I group them by major. For example, let's say I have 3 criminal justice majors in my class. I'll have them in a group, and I'll give them a project to do to find out how they will use writing skills in their career. And what they have to do is they have to do a little bit of research, and typically that means interviewing people. Like I'll have them go talk to the criminal justice instructor, or I'll have them talk with a police officer to find out what type of writing they do in their career. Okay, that's a formal group. And then the one I use most often are called informal groups, and those are usually just a couple of students, maybe 3. Like we read a book in my freshman comp class called Step Out on Nothing by Byron Pitts, who works for 60 Minutes, and it's about his struggles with literacy and his road to success and all that. And so let's say that they've read a chapter in the book for homework. I might have an informal group just get together real quickly and maybe answer a few questions together, or just to discuss a certain component of the chapter. With informal groups, it might be working together to develop a good thesis statement for an essay. It's the things that we typically go solo on, but they just love to discuss together, and again, that helps with that bond. So almost anything that you would normally have them do on their own, you could put a couple or 3 together. I'll even do paired quizzes, just low stakes type things where they just get used to working together and, feeling that sense of community.
Okay, great. We have another question from Connie who asks, is the LS portion the same amount of credit hours as the credit level course?
Oh, that's a very good question. It depends on the school, but in Virginia, the freshman comp course is 3 credits, and the accelerated learning portion, the developmental portion, is 2 credits. When we first started,
and another.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well. When we first started, we did leave it as 3 credits because developmental writing was always a 3-credit course as well. But after teaching it for a semester, what I found was, since I'm covering so much of what I would normally cover in the developmental portion, I'm covering in the freshman comp portion, I didn't need that much time. And so we were able to whittle it down to 2 credits, and that, of course, that helps with the financial end of it as well.
Okay. And then we have a question from Sarah from El Camino College. Our college has 30 students in freshman comp and 35 in developmental comp.
Ouch.
Do you know of schools where ALP has been used on a scale like this? And do you think that the small class size is a key to the effectiveness of ALP?
In the research that I've done, I don't know of any where the courses are that big. And I cannot emphasize enough, if I had to pick the one thing that I think determines how successful ALP is, it's the small class size. It really is. And as I said earlier, there is the data to show that the small class size is actually financially beneficial to your college.
Right, yeah, that's what I would think also. Okay then, well, I think we're just going to wrap this up and start preparing for the next session at 11, but thank you so much, Michelle. If anybody else has any further questions, please let us know and we'll forward them on to Michelle. And so, yeah, thank you so much, Michelle. Very informative.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.